Okay, so this is a photo of me as a university student in Australia learning to be a industrial designer, which is sort of what I grew up to become. I designed a whole bunch of toys before I had a bit of a crisis, switched everything, moved over to Canada where I started teaching at OCAD, and last year I just started the process of switching everything again. So, like you always do, you go on a travel adventure to try to find yourself again. And this led to a very, very awkward feeling of me being the sort of the rich, white, urbanite, overeducated person having this very weird, awkward experience in Africa visiting my friends, which led to lots of conversations sitting around the campfires with Massai warriors. So while I was over there, I had these really fantastic conversations, and I met this one particular Massai warrior called Josh, who gave me all sorts of fantastic stories and experiences. So what's really important as a background to this is that for Maasai people, cows are really, really important. Your measure of success is how many cows you have and how big the family you have and how many wives and the village that you're able to support is sort of your sign of status within the community. Which is kind of a bit of a problem because all the cows are leading to all sorts of overgrazing and all sorts of issues. So I'm sitting around the campfire with Josh and all these guys trying to explain what it means to be a design professor, which is kind of a very abstract concept, and I'm feeling very, 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 very self-conscious about it. And I'm explaining to him that I'm doing all this design research around denim jeans and issues of overconsumption and mass manufacturing, which is pretty weird. And Josh is like, well, why do you buy all these jeans? And so I'm trying to explain the connection between jeans and make it relatable. And we sort of get to this idea that for a North American, owning as many jeans as you possibly can is kind of like a Maasai warrior having as many cows as you possibly can. And Josh was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. That's totally the sort of issues that we face. And so we're talking about how issues of change in behavior are sort of the biggest things to struggle with. And so I was kind of getting a bit down about how do you make change? Is it possible to change? How do you foster change and all these sorts of things? And Josh is saying, well, yeah, of course change is possible. Change is happening constantly. And he shared this story about being a Maasai warrior and what that is to change in a different kind of environment. So Josh was the youngest son of a really, really successful father. So he was the 16th son of a whole number of wives in this large community. And so as things were changing, his father was sort of being encouraged to embrace this concept of school. So Josh was the first of the family to get sent to school because the family was big enough to kind of spare a son. So Josh goes off to school and it's this really, really big honor, right? So he's going off to school and he wants to impress his father. It's this really big experience to be able to go off and not be in the herd with all these different things. So he goes off to school, and what's really important to know about within the schooling system in Kenya is it's all about ranking. So it's all about how you are against all the other students. There's a whole bunch of issues around that, which is another story. But what's really, really important is that Josh worked really, really, really hard and became first in his class. And so he was really proud. And you should have heard him telling these stories. He's comparing himself to all these other people. So he works really, really hard, goes and shares this story with his father. He's showing off to his dad that he's number one. And his dad is furious. So imagine this. Imagine being Josh, telling your dad that you're the first in class, you're number one, and your dad literally being furious and walking out on you. And the culture over there, you can't ask questions, right? So poor Josh is just completely confused. Goes back, works harder and harder and harder, and at the end of the year, he's still ranked in the top 3, and he's featured in all the final ceremonies. So he's featured in the final ceremonies. His father gets a position of honor to be part of the final thing, and his father's really confused. His weak son, which is how he sees his son, is getting awards, and he's getting prizes, and he's getting discussed about. And so as Josh tells the story, there's this change in body language. For a Maasai warrior, above everything, it's really important to be humble and honest and forgiving. So his father took his son aside and said, I'm really sorry I was angry at you. I grew up in a world where there was no such concept of ranking. Everything about my world was about quantity, the size of the family, the size of the herd, the size of everything. When you came back from school with the number one, it was an insult. You brought back the smallest number ever. So he apologized to his son and said, for being first, I'll give you your first cow. You're going to start your first herd, but it's going to be different than my herd. You're going to be a Massai warrior, but it's going to be different than how I was. So this was incredible. So I'm sitting around the campfire with all these guys, and they're talking really honestly with me about how they're at the transition between different cultures. So we were sharing all these stories about cultural change and what that means and how you do that. And it was really apparent that for these guys, they were in a situation where they were holding on to traditions, working out what does it mean to be a Maasai warrior and what am I going to hold on to, but also what does it mean to be sort of something in the contemporary society and engaging in different ways and dealing with this kind of different space. And so it sounds kind of funny, but it got to this funny story of me sharing things about being trained as an industrial designer but not really associating that, and how in Western culture we're really good at ditching the past and jumping full on into the new, and him sharing stories about what traditions are important and how to hold on to them and how not to hold on to them. So I wanted to share this story because it's something that has really resonated with me, and I don't still really know why. When I was workshopping this talk, we were talking about like this thing of going around the world and seeing everyone in different stages of change, and how there's a very unique story from Josh about small shifts of value that make large cultural changes. So I just wanted to say thank you to Liam for making this possible, and Josh and the gang for sharing their stories with me. Yeah, thank you.